Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one online platform for creatives. So I first started as a photographer back in the early 2000s, and reminiscing back to those first few years, I always just thought right away that it was the image making that was always going to be the most difficult thing, and the better I could get at making photographs, the more growth I would see. And fast forward 20 years down the road, I definitely know nowadays that as important as it is to improve your skills, I think regardless of your abilities, the thing that's going to hold you back the most is your mindset and how you approach things. So in this video today, I want to talk about 3 things that I think can absolutely hold photographers and say artists back. And the reason I choose these 3 is just because they're things that I have found are really important for me to constantly be aware of, because I've fallen victim to them many times in the past. And I think simply just like being conscious of these can help you make changes and help you see a lot of growth. So the first thing we're going to talk about is avoiding discomfort. And this is a big one. And I'm not talking about these like super dangerous, completely outside of our comfort zone things, but rather I think as artists and as photographers and just as human beings, every day there's these small little things that bring with them some discomfort. And learning to embrace that and use those things almost as a bit of a compass is what's most important, because the reality is usually the things you're after are on the other side. And by not embracing those things, you often end up in this sort of like limbo, or what I like to call the preparation phase. So an example would be, let's say you have an idea for a podcast that you want to start. But rather than just like sitting down and recording an episode and getting it out there, you spend like 5 or 6 days doing a deep dive, researching the best audio equipment you could possibly buy. Or let's say you want to shoot more portraits of strangers, but instead of just like going outside and asking people and making images, you sit at home and do a bunch of research about lenses and different cameras and look at comparisons and stuff. And with any endeavor, I think there are these little details and little things we can pivot to that pull us away from the main thing, that allow us to feel like we're still being productive and moving in the right direction, but really it's just allowing us to avoid doing the thing that makes us feel the most uncomfortable. And a project that's always been a really good reminder to me about the importance of embracing discomfort is Alex So's book, Niagara, which is just an incredible body of work. But in that book, he has a bunch of portraits of people, which is quite common with his work, but there are some images where he's gone and photographed couples, complete strangers, in their hotel rooms, completely naked. And you look at this and you're like, how did he approach this? What did he know? He must have knew something or had something to be able to do this, when the reality is he just went out there and approached strangers and probably was incredibly uncomfortable doing so and asked them if they'd be interested in doing this. So I like to think of that often, because the reality is something like photographing strangers, if it's something you want to do more of, there's no secret. You just go out there and you ask. And that doesn't make it any easier, but it does help just knowing that if this is something you want to do, you got to lean into it and you got to embrace that. So this is something that I try and keep in mind. And for me, I experience this stuff almost daily. For example, doing YouTube, every time I go to post a video, even after doing this for 6 years, I feel uncomfortable. I'm questioning what I'm talking about, if it's coming across the right way, if it's a good idea. But again, leaning into it, I know that this is the right direction and this is what I need to do. So I would recommend just like be real with yourself. Ask yourself these questions. Have you been avoiding something because it scares you a little bit or it makes you feel uncomfortable? And if it does, that is probably the thing that you should be leaning into. So number 2, the second thing that can hold you back is placing your focus on things that don't move you forward, basically wasting time and energy. And this sounds pretty obvious, but it is bigger than you think, so hear me out here. So really 2 parts to this. The first one's pretty straightforward. When it comes to actual time, obviously time is limited. So let's say in a day you have like an hour free to work on a photography project. Well, any time you take from that hour and spend on something else is just going to take away from the project itself. So, if you have a bunch of things you want to get done, don't sit around and watch movies all day on the couch. Super obvious, but what's more important and what I really want to touch on for this is not the actual minutes that you spend on something, but how that can compound and affect the rest of your day. And as an example, in the online world, or for the sake of this video, the photography world online, go to like a subreddit or a forum or a comment section, and you'll find people having arguments and debates about, you know, why something's better than the other or this and that. Like I said before, it's not the time you're spending specifically, it's how that compounds, both in like a negative and positive way. So let's say you spend 20 minutes getting into an argument online with someone. It's not the 20 minutes, it's how that leaves you for the rest of the day. So you might feel uninspired, you might be frustrated, you might be thinking about it, and all of a sudden that 20 minutes has become 2 hours. And on the flip side, if you spent that same amount of time doing something productive, valuable, helpful, it would leave you in a completely different headspace and probably help you out through the rest of the day. So I think it's so important to just get like really clear on how are you spending your time and energy, and what result is that giving you? Is it moving you in the direction you want to go, and is it beneficial? So the decision's, of course, completely up to you. I'm not trying to tell people what they should and shouldn't do. I'm merely just suggesting that you should be very conscious of how you're spending your time and what result that's giving you, because this is one area I think where you can see a lot of change by just shifting your focus a little bit. So back in a minute, just have to take a quick break to talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is Squarespace. So when it comes to building a website, what is important to me is finding something that's easy to use and is flexible for my business. And Squarespace checks all of those boxes. They have a wide range of really great looking templates to choose from, and they're easily customizable. As a photographer, I love that I can set up a gallery and then simply just click and drag to organize and rearrange my images. And then I can also easily add things like an online shop for selling things like my latest book, or even connect with third-party integrations to offer high-quality prints at the click of a button. So check out squarespace.com today, sign up for a free trial, test it out. When you're ready to launch, you can use my link below to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Let's get back into it. So number 3 is what I like to call creative friction, and this links back to our talk about time. So there's this principle called the law of diminishing returns, and basically what this states is that the benefits you gain from doing something start to get proportionally smaller as you invest more energy. So basically, most of the success from like a photo project is going to come from like the meat of it, like the work itself. It's not going to come from spending 10 extra days polishing things. But on like a lot smaller scale, I like to call this creative friction. And what creative friction looks like for me often is taking a specific task that should take like a minute or two and messing with it so much that it ends up taking an hour, to the point though where no one probably would know any difference whatsoever. And I'll do this often. I'll like export an image, send it to my phone. I'm going to post it on Instagram, and it'll look too contrasty, and I'll go back and I'll tweak it, and then I'll send another one, and then I'll do that like 5 or 6 times, adjusting screen brightness and trying to get it perfect. And all of a sudden, this thing that probably should have taken about 2 to 3 minutes has taken 45 minutes. Yet you could take every single version that I just messed with, and probably no one at all would notice a difference whatsoever. So basically just spending all of this extra time but seeing no extra benefit. So I'm not suggesting that you should be a hack and not care about your work, but more so just like be honest with yourself and look at things and see if you're spending like an unnecessary amount of time on certain things. I think if you do look at these things, you'll find there's a lot of areas where things could just move on a lot quicker. This happens as well with like even wanting to start a new project or start something new. You know, going back to the first point, we get discomfort, we kind of avoid things, we poke around, you know, we fill our schedules with kind of like frivolous details and stuff like that. So eliminating as much of this friction as possible, I think you'd be amazed at how much you can actually get done. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I know that you might not connect with all of those, but at the very least, I hope it's some food for thought. And I know for me personally, these 3 things, just embracing discomfort, really paying attention to where my focus goes, my time and energy, and what result that's giving me, and then eliminating as much of this creative friction as possible. If I can really stay on top of those 3 things, that is when I've personally like seen the most growth, but also just enjoyed things the most with my photography. So hope this helps. If there's anything in particular that's worked for you, would love to hear about it below. Other than that, just want to say thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon.